Well, welcome everyone. Welcome, welcome. We are so happy to have you join us for the Festival of Training. We are blessed and wondrous to be here with the illustrious Mr. Jeff Brennan, one of my favorite Rotarians. He's going to be talking tonight about the Rotary Foundation. And Jeff actually gave a brief discussion and presentation in my Rotary Club, the Bellevue Eastside Rotary Club, and it was packed with information. So I'm going to talk about a couple of housekeeping things. I've muted everybody, so feel free to unmute yourself if you do have some questions along the way. I'll be admitting some folks in as they join, but if there's any questions that you have, certainly feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat. We'll try and add that into the presentation. But should you unmute yourself to ask a question, I will ask that you remute yourself. It makes for a much better recording and keeps out any background noise as we go through the presentation. With no further ado, Mr. Jeff Brennan, I turn the table over to you, and he has a great presentation. Take it away, Jeff.
Okay, so let me just throw this up real quick on the screen. And I'll start the presentation here in just a minute, but I wanted to thank you first, Jason. I appreciate very much you being the tech host tonight. Wendy Fisher for organizing all of the training, and Howard for joining us along with some of, I can see the Global Grants team and a few other people here too as well. So welcome this evening. I thought what I would do tonight is, I've given a couple of presentations during the year, pop-up presentations on different aspects of the Rotary Foundation. But, you know, as I thought about tonight, I want to focus on one area, and the area is called the World Fund. And I think when I'm done, you'll understand why. But I thought that's the area I really want to talk about and explain what's going on there, because there's been a tremendous amount of changes over the past 2 years as a result of what's gone on in the World Fund itself. So I'm going to talk, I'll explain what it is, how big it is. I'm going to get into some detail. I'm going to throw out some numbers, but hopefully at the end of this, you'll have a pretty good concept as to what the World Fund is, the importance of it to us for our grant programs, and then and for other programs, and why we've had to make some changes that we've had to make in it. And I say we, it's really the Rotary Foundation, but it is we. And so that's what I'll talk about tonight. If you have a burning question, jump in. Otherwise, I'm hoping I'll have some time at the end to have some Q&A. And with that, let me go ahead and get started here. So again, welcome. I always start off with the same slide. It seems like every presentation, the mission of the Rotary Foundation is to enable Rotarians to advance world understanding, goodwill, and peace through the improvement of health, the support of education, and the alleviation of poverty. The really neat thing I like about the Rotary Foundation is that it's there to support Rotary International. It's there to support our districts. It's there to support our clubs, and the missions are aligned. So that's a great thing. In terms of, this is my typical next slide for the presentation. It's, you know, how well are we doing? And the Charity Navigator, which you can Google, go to it, rates charities with over $1 million in annual revenues, they call it, nonprofits throughout the world. And it is a pretty tough rater. And for the past several years, the Rotary Foundation has always had 4 stars. It's rated, you know, between 96 to, it had 100 at one time, but the latest rating is 99.16, and it's a tremendous rating. And what that means is that your dollars that you're donating are being fiduciarily looked after, and not just by the Rotary Foundation, but even down to what we do in the district, in our global grants team and our district grants team, what we ask of all Rotarians to do with any funds that come out of the Rotary Foundation. And you know, it's a combination. The Charity Navigator it's a financial score plus an accountability and transparency score. And I always tell people, if you get an opportunity, go to Charity Navigator, plug in some of your favorite charities, and you'll be amazed sometimes at what you can find out. But we have just a great rating. And then on top of that, we were number 47. The Rotary Foundation was 47 out of the 100 largest US charities, and that was as of December 2020. So we have a big, big charity. And with that comes complexity, and with that comes sometimes challenges, but also the benefits that we get out of it. So to sort of set the stage, I wanted to remind people of the big buckets of the Rotary Foundation. And, you know, they are first and foremost Polio Plus. That has not gone away. That's still basically the lead program of our foundation. The annual fund, and that is not only does that provide funds for all our district and global grants, but that actually feeds into the World Fund as well. So the annual fund contributions that you give today, we'll talk more about it, come back to help us through grants. They come back to help the World Fund itself. And then finally, the endowment fund. And I talked a little bit about this in the past, but this is basically where you can give to the fund. You can give any amount. If you give $25,000 or more, you can name the endowment, but you can give any amount. And those funds are in there and they stay in there perpetually. So if you give, you know, $100 to the endowment fund for peace, it's going to stay in there and it's going to generate interest for peace projects that Rotary is involved in. And then some other things that you can give through the Rotary Foundation, donor advised funds, directed gifts. You can actually give directly to global grants, to peace, and to the disaster response fund. But today what we're primarily going to be talking about is this aspect here, the annual fund feeding into the World Fund, and the impact that what's happened over the past several years has had. Okay. Okay. The World Fund is best known for being part of the annual fund or share. So, and I kind of, you know, annual fund, share, they're interchangeable. Share just means if you give to the annual fund, we get some of the dollars back directly, which I'll show you here in a second. And some of the dollars go to the World Fund. So the annual fund and share are kind of interchangeable. Many of you have seen this before. This is kind of a different look at it, but dollars going into the annual fund in year one are kept at the Rotary Foundation for 3 years. During these 3 years, they help fund the administration of the Rotary Foundation. And then at the end of that, we get 50% back through district designated funds that we can use on district grants, global grants, and other programs. Now in our district, we have chosen to actually split this 50%. So 25% goes to district grants, 25% goes to global grants. Some districts actually have different percentages, but that's what we've chosen to do here in our district. And the remaining 50% goes to the World Fund. And I'll talk more about how that's used in the World Fund. With currently 5% earmarked for operating expenses. And that's going to change. And that's one of the things that you'll see as we go forward. So what does the World Fund support? Because it supports a lot more than just district and global grants. First of all, of course, global grants. We get back matches. Today, it's currently $1 for dollar. For every district designated fund dollar we give in, we get back $1 out of the World Fund. That's going to change too. It contributes to Polio Plus, Peace Center programs, other grants and partnership grants, to program operations, to fund development and general administration. And I'm going to show you, by the way, I'm going to break down this into a lot more detail. And fund development and general administration. And by the way, we'll make all these slides available. Who'd ever like to see them, we'll make sure you can get to them. And basically it supports expenditures such as grant finance operations, programs of scale. And for those of you who are well aware of it, programs of scale is a brand new program. It's a $2 million grant. And we were the first district in the world to receive one, led by the Federal Way Foundation, or excuse me, Federal Way Club, with Rotary Malaria Partners, just received that. So we're starting off the whole programs of scale. And it's just a great program. I think it was in last month's newsletter, the district newsletter. You can read more about it. And then special trustee initiatives. And primarily what that's gone to in the past year has been to COVID-19 disaster response grants. So you can see the World Fund feeds a lot of different things. I think a lot of us think of it as just global grants primarily, but it goes into a lot. Now, this next slide is a look at with two things. One is annual fund contributions is this yellow line. And these are dollars, these are millions of dollars per year. So you can see in 2019-20, Rotarians contributed $123 million. It came in a variety of ways, which I'll share with you, but $123 million. But you can see it's gone down a little bit from 140 to 123. This has been primarily driven by two things. One, some loss of Rotarian membership, and two, probably even bigger, is that money, especially large contributions that would have gone to the annual fund, are now going to the endowment fund. And so instead of contributing maybe $100,000 gift to the annual fund, it's going to the endowment fund. And if you think about it, that money is going to be used year after year after year. It's going to generate a lot of interest. So we've had this line pretty much remaining fairly stable over the years, but look at the growth of global grants. They have really grown, and our district is part of this growth too, from $47 million to $95 million in 2019-20. So this is driving some of the challenge with the World Fund. It is being challenged in terms of being able to generate enough funds to fund all of these global grants, plus all of the other programs. So let me give you an example, and I'm going to focus most of the rest of these slides on last year, 2019-20, which is the entire last year that we've got available to us. All right, the World Fund stood at $82 million. That's how much that had come into it, and here's where the funds came from. Let me, I want to click through these real quick, and then I'll talk about them. I should have thought about this before I set up all these clickers. So it came from a couple of different sources. First of all, the annual fund share. So remember last year, about $120 million came in to the annual fund. Well, half of that came in and went right here out of the share program. So this is, $69 million out of the 82 million came from the annual fund contributions last year. But there were other funding sources too. Some people contribute to the endowment fund and say, I want these dollars to go to the annual fund. And the interest now is up to almost $7 million a year being generated from endowment funds. So this will continue to grow. There were direct contributions to the World Fund, which, by the way, you can also make through the endowment fund. And then there are some other areas that it came into as well. But the net expenditures, which is what I'm going to focus on, was $84.1 million. And if you look at the math, 82 million came in, 84.1 went out. So it actually overspent by $2.1 million. And the trustees are looking at this, said, we've got to do things differently if we're going to fund all these programs and continue to grow and be fiduciarily responsible. So I'm going to spend the next several slides just going through all of the different program areas and talking about them and talking about what the World Fund does. And again, it's easy to get lost sometimes in these slides, so I'll make the presentation available. But I think if you could stay with me on the bigger pictures, what I really want people to focus on here. So we'll start with, here was the overall Rotary Foundation expenditures for 2019 and to 20, the Rotary year. $362 million. And you can see each of the different areas. So I'm going to go into each one of those different areas here shortly. Polio Plus having 152 million. I have a hard time with these types of charts, so I actually created a different chart. Let's see if I can come in here and flip this over. So I put this slide together because it's easier for me to look at it from a pie chart perspective, and then I'll go back to those charts. But you can see where the funds, 42% of all of the Rotary Foundation expenditures were spent on the Polio Plus program. That equated to 67 polio projects. In Peace Fellows, which is just 1%, that funded 69, Peace Fellows last year to go to receive upper education in peace programs at one of the 6 universities around the world that the peace centers actually support. District grants, 9%, and that represented 490 district grants, but that's a little misleading. It's actually a much, much bigger number than that because there's 490 districts received a district grant. If they're anything like our district, we took that one grant and then actually created almost 100 grants out of it. So this is a really large number of grants. Global grants, 27% of the money, and that represented last year alone 1,359 global grants. Just a tremendous number. And then you can see some of the other areas: general admin, fund development, program operations, other grants that came in, and then disaster response. It had never been there before. This was the first year last year that disaster response showed up in the Rotary Foundation in a big way. And of course, that was to battle COVID. So I hope that gives you kind of an overall picture. Again, to me, it just talks about the largeness of the foundation when you can spend $362 million around the world to support your projects. So I'm going to move back again and talk about each one of these different areas. And in Polio Plus, 152 million was spent. 8.4 million of that came from the World Fund. And the way this works in the World Fund is that if a district chooses out of its district designated funds to fund the Polio Plus program, which you can do. So let's say you out of DDF, you say, I want $10,000 to go support the Polio Plus. The World Fund would match it 100%. So that match last year equaled $8.4 million. Okay, global grants. $40.3 million came out of the World Fund for global grants. And that includes 1.4 million area of focused earmarked donations. So that's where a Rotarian has come in and said, I'm going to contribute to the Rotary Foundation, but I want my monies used in a particular way. It may be basic education, it may be water projects, and those dollars, and whether the dollars are in an endowment fund where the interest is just coming or it's just a direct gift, 1.4 million came in. So $40.3 million of the World Funds were used for that. Okay, district grants. There were no contributions from the World Fund. World Fund doesn't match district grant projects. That's strictly DDF. So your annual fund contributions, when they come back to our district 4 years later, I like to say that a quarter out of the dollar you give comes right back into our district grants program. There's no World Funds used for that. Last year, or coming into this year, we have about $141,000 in DDF for our foundation district grant programs. Other grants, about 1.1 million came from the World Fund. Not a huge amount. Disaster response grants, $3 million came from the World Fund. Again, I mentioned that this had gone from zero in prior years. Rotary has traditionally not funded grant projects in response to disasters. Last year, because of the severity across the world, they did. $3 million. Our district received $25,000 of this $3 million for our own disaster response grants. So you see the importance of the World Fund to all of these different areas. And then peace centers. Again, $10,000 came from the World Fund. And you might say, well, that's not a huge amount. Well, part of that is because the peace center programs are almost fully endowed. So they get a lot, over the years, Rotarians have given a significant amount to endow our peace centers programs, which is a great news story. And so they only had to contribute $10,000 of World Fund expenditures. And program operations, $18.8 million from the World Fund. This includes like operational expenses for all the Rotary Foundation grant programs, but not Polio Plus. So everything else to help the programs run. Fund development and general administration, 13.5 million. And you know, this is a good. Let me get the rest of this out here. I like to focus on this bottom area because the majority of the expenditures here are covered by investment returns from the annual fund. Remember, the annual fund, when you give $1 this year, it's held for 3 years, and the interest off of that is helping to fund all of this general administration costs to run the foundation for us. So, looking at it in total, $84.1 million. Again, $2 million over what was taken in, but here are the different areas that they contributed to. You can't run a foundation or a business though if you're overspending your income by $2 million a year. And so the trustees got together and came up with a series of decisions, and I'll share those decisions with you now. Many of you are aware of them. If you're not, you'll start seeing some of these come into effect pretty soon. So first, district designated fund contributions to Polio Plus. Remember that match against the district is only going to be matched at 50% going forward. So if a district decides it wants to give to Polio Plus, it's only going to be matched 50%. And I'm going to talk a little bit further about each one of these, but I just want to cover them at a high level here. Reduce the World Fund match of DDF from 100% to 80% for global grants. So this is a big move. In the past, when we could contribute, for example, $25,000 out of our district designated funds or DDF to a grant project and get back $25,000 from the World Fund, we're only going to get back 80% of that going forward. So it's going to be less of a match to fund projects with. And again, this is to close that gap. 5% of the current year annual fund share contributions will be taken equally from the World Fund and DDF to help fund operating costs. I'll talk a little bit more about this. And then effective 1 July 2026, any rollover DDF not used within the previous 5 Rotary years is basically going to be pulled from the district and used elsewhere. Our district is very fortunate. We may roll over a few dollars at the end of each year, but they're quickly consumed next year. Some districts have basically let DDF sit there and grow, and that's not going to happen in the future. So here are the decisions. Let me talk a little bit more about the impact of these. So first, contributions to Polio Plus. Remember, they're going to be matched at 50%. So the district, let's say it gives $20,000. In previous years, it would have gotten $20,000. This year, or actually going forward, it's going to get $10,000 match, but the Gates Foundation is still going to match the now combined $30,000, 2 for 1, or $60,000. So the effective result is $90,000 for polio eradication. So it's still a good match, just not as good as it was in the past. I would take that kind of a match. Decision 2, reduce the World Fund match from 100% to 80%. I mentioned here. So if a particular project has $20,000, in prior years, it would have received $40,000 towards a global grant project. Going forward, it's going to only receive, and actually when I say going forward, basically as of July 1, it will receive $36,000 for the global grant. Still a significant match, just not as good as it was in prior years. So decision 3, which I talked about a little bit, currently what happens is that the annual fund share contributions, 3 years down the road, we get back $50. The World Fund gets back $45, and 5 are used for operating expenses. They're just going to change this a little so that effectively $2.50 is going to come out of our district designated funds, which means we'll get a little bit less. The World Fund will not have as much out, but the operating expenses still will remain the same at $5. And primarily, you know, as I look at this, this is really just to shift some of the dollars back into the World Fund so that they can stem that loss and make sure that they can cover programs around the world. I'm not going to talk too much. We don't have an issue with rollover dollars, but some districts do. And if they do at the end of the 5 years, it's going to be contributed back to other programs in the World Fund and elsewhere. So here's a look at, which I think is pretty neat. Here's a look at overall the financial impact of all of these changes. So no longer provide a World Fund match. The impact is going to be 7 million for cash contributions, excuse me. And I didn't mention this, but in the past for global grants, you could actually get a third party to contribute or a Rotarian to put in a cash contribution, and that would be matched. It's no longer matched. The annual impact of that is $7 million. DDF contributions to Polio Plus being matched at 50%. The annual impact is expected to be a $5 million positive, if you will. Reducing the World Fund match of DDF from 180%, $6.3 million. And subtotal about $18.3 million that will help to strengthen up the World Fund. And then shifting, basically shifting the 5% to 2.5 for out of districts and out of the World Fund means a $3 million. So a pretty significant financial impact of $21.3 million. And this is expected to go on and on and on. And what this will do is it will allow us to continue to grow and fund the growing global grants programs. Okay, so if you haven't fallen asleep and you're still with me, I thought I would use this time to stop right here and see what kinds of questions people had. One thing I didn't mention was on top of all of this was the fact that club matches for global grants also stopped too. So that was a significant change as well. Again, all trying to strengthen up the World Fund overall so that it can provide support across the board as it's doing today. So with that, I'm going to stop here and I'll stop sharing and take some questions. And then I've got just a few other slides, or I can go back to slides if need be. So I guess I'll leave it up here in case anybody has a question where they want me to go back to slides.
That'd be great. And once again, everyone, my name is Jason Richard. I'm the tech host for the webinar tonight. If you'd like to ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself. And then we're just asking everybody to mute themselves once you're done interacting with Jeff. I'll kick off the first question. So Jeff, based on the changes that you're forecasting, based on what the trustees have done, we're still sort of expecting that roughly 120 million sort of contribution to come in and make sure that the net flows into the World Fund still remain at that level, but we've got grants that are increasing. So have they done anything as far as the grant writing process or things of how they're going to control some of the growth that we've been seeing in the expenditures so that we have an opportunity to build up some of this buffer?
So I think some of the changes that you've seen just to stopping club matches, cutting the DDF match from 100 to 80%, some of those are going to naturally impact global grants. Some of the grants I expect are going to be either smaller. You still have a 30,000 minimum. Some of the grants will still be smaller. It'll take longer to get some funding for the grants because people are going to have to scramble. If they wanted a $100,000 grant, they might not have had to get as much in terms of their own funding because of the generosity of the DDF and the match. So that's been basically it. Other than that, I truly expect that global grants will continue to go up. The challenge is going to be is, can we keep the contributions going into the annual fund at the level they've been going in? Because that's, if you don't do that, you can't fund district grants and you can't fund global grants at the same level. We've had sort of that challenge over the past 2 or 3 years. Our contributions to the annual fund have been going down. Our contributions to the endowment fund have been going up significantly. I mean, extremely significantly. But it takes a while. If you think about it, if you give $100,000 to the annual fund, in 3 years, we get $50,000 of that directly back into the district, which is what happened last year. There was a significant contribution 3 years prior. And we got to use 25,000 of that for district grants and 25,000 of that for global grants. I think now that people are starting to realize that, you know, instead of just having that one shot, if you will, deal, I'm going to take that $100,000 and I'm going to give it to the endowment fund. And if they do that, even if they direct it to annual funds to share, for example, instead of getting that $100,000, we're going to get the interest off of it instead of the full amount. That's not insignificant, and over time it's going to grow. Over the past years, over the past 3 to 4 years, I've seen it grow from $8,000 to $11,000 that we're getting back each year to help fund global grants and to help fund district grants. And that'll continue to go, but there's a little bit of a lag there. So the challenge for us is to keep up the annual fund giving in the interim. So hopefully that answered your question.
It did. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So Jeff, this is Howard. How much money did the district give? Did the district members donate this year, this past year, 1920, since we're not done with 2021 yet, to the annual fund? Did you already mention that number?
I didn't, and you know, in the programs I've done for clubs and everything, I talk about that, but I chose not to tonight because I was focused on training. I wanted to make sure the focus was on the World Fund as versus our district giving.
Right.
I can easily pull that number up here if you want, Howard. So it's why don't we take a couple of more questions, and if we have enough time, I'll grab that slide and pull it up.
Well, I'll tell you the reason why I
Yeah.
ask, because if everybody, if God forbid, every Rotarian in the district were to do a $10 a month district direct contribution, which is 27.5 cents a day, that would give us, I believe, $230,000 or about that on an annual basis to the annual fund. If I did that.
Yep.
I mean, can you imagine? I'm assuming it's more than what we've done.
It is. Just to give you an idea. So if you think about this year, we have $141,000, give or take a few cents, for district grants. We had about that same amount for global grants. So 3 years prior to that, to get to that total of what is that, $280,000 that came into the district, our Rotarians contributed $560,000 to the fund.
Wow.
That's what it took. Half of it comes back to the district directly, and we get more back through matches on global grants. The rest of the funds are used to fund all the other wonderful projects like peace and the disaster fund and everything else. But that was 3 years ago, was $560,000.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's significant. I will share with you, since you asked that question, and you know, I'm a stats type person, so if you get me going down this route, I'll keep going. But would anybody venture to guess what percent of our Rotarians contribute more than $1 to the Rotary Foundation? And I'm talking about any fund of the Rotary Foundation, whether it's annual fund, polio, any part of the Rotary Foundation. Let me just ask, let me see if I can we get a share of hands of people. If you think that in any one year, more than 90% of our Rotarians give to the Rotary Foundation, just go ahead and raise your hand. 90% or more. Okay, how about 80% or more of our Rotarians? Do you think 80% or more of our Rotarians? Okay, a few hands go up. The number actually for last year was 70%. So that meant 30% of our Rotarians gave nothing to the Rotary Foundation. And that's a challenge. That's pretty similar. I talked to my counterparts in districts around here too. And so the challenge for all of us who lead clubs, or when we led clubs, is how do we convince people to give to the Rotary Foundation? And you know, part of it is making sure they understand the value. And it doesn't take a lot. I mean, just to be an E-rate club, it's a $25 contribution per person. That, you know, the Rotary Foundation would like to have you give $100, but it can be as low as like $25. So our challenge is convincing people that it's to their benefit to give. And I'm one who would definitely more sell people on why they need to give. I'm not one into beating people into why they give, because I want to make sure people understand the value that they're getting out of it too. So, other questions?
Do you know of a district that has a really significantly higher percentage?
I'm going to have to look around. I know none in our neighborhood do. So, and it is a frustration for the people that are in my position that are trying to drive as much giving as possible. And I think that's part of the push behind every Rotarian every year. It's to try and get people to contribute. That's also the push, to your point, Howard, behind Rotary Direct. If you can get people to contribute even $25 a year through Rotary Direct, it becomes automatic.
Right.
And so that's the challenge. And there are also other reasons. I mean, some of it self-inflicted. If people have a choice between giving to the Rotary Foundation or sometimes their own club foundation, they might go with their club foundation because it's very, very, very local, very, pointed, if you will. So we just need to convince them to give to both.
But we'll see what happens next year. See if we can move that barometer up from 70 to.
Yeah. So this year, we're gonna. In fact, I'm going to be setting up a call with all the foundation chairs and club presidents for this year in the next couple of weeks, just to show them where we're at, so we can try to end as strong as we can. We're challenged in the annual fund this year, and I think, Howard, you know that, and so we've got to end strong. Or 3 years from now, we'll have much less for our grants. So, but other questions too around the changes to the World Fund, or even just comments, or did anything surprise you about what's going on and those sorts of things?
I was wondering, Jeff, why they decided to lower it
To lower which part?
from 100%
I
to
haven't. I will.
Okay. I think that was just another move to try to save some of the outflow going out from the World Fund and try to just stem that basic tidal wave, because the World Fund has never overspent itself like it did last year. And you could see, I mean, if it didn't have to put monies towards some of the other programs like the Disaster Relief Fund, it wouldn't have. But that was a good decision. That benefited a lot of districts and a lot of projects. But it basically just to try and slow down some of the outflow and try and preserve the World Fund, if you will. And I think they're also recognizing that. In fact, I'll show you a slide here when I jump back in. I've got just several more slides I want to share with people, but I'll show you a slide about the endowment fund overall, and I'll talk just a little bit about our district. I will talk about our district for that piece on it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so if there's no other questions, I'm going to go just through a few more slides, and then I will basically take it back to. I do have a couple of sales pitches to talk about. Here's my first one. How can you help celebrate the success of global grants if you're involved in them? So this is specifically to the World Fund. You can use existing district designated funds. Again, we don't have an issue doing that here in our district. If anything, we would love to have more, because right now we are overspent to the tune of $7,000 in DDF and global grants this year, which is a great place to be in. Increase annual fund contributions, which is always critical, and create your own legacy with a gifted endowment fund. And then some of you who've seen these slides before know I always make a pitch for our team. This is your foundation team. Sid Siegel is the treasurer. Kim Lawrence basically focuses on Paul Harris Society. Ezra Tasomi is focused on Polio Plus advocacy. Gene Lippett's on major gifts. And then two teams. We have district grants team led by Kathy Burnell and global grants team led by Kathleen Davis. Great people on both teams supporting them. And I believe I saw Kathleen and Larry Logue both on this tonight. and then Stewardship Son Michael Fam. You can reach out to any of those people, myself, ask questions. We'll be more than glad to help. There's a bunch of different resources that you can do. Rotary.org is always a great resource. Your donor history report. If you go online, and I'm always stunned at the number of people who don't know this, but if you go online into Rotary.org, you've got to sign up and have an account there, which is easy to do. You can click on and find out your donor history report, and it'll show every dollar that you've contributed to the Rotary Foundation and where you are at any point in time. And if you have any questions, I always say, go to your club foundation chair, your district foundation committee, or myself. But last resort, Rotary Support Center at Rotary.org. If you email them questions, they are incredibly fast at getting back to you. And I use them all the time on some of the questions I get. So some of the plenty of resources for you. And I told, and I put this in my presentations as well. The Rotary Foundation, this is the why for me. This is why I give. These are all children out of the Eastern Guatemalan highlands. They're in indigenous villages, and we've used our Rotary Foundation dollars to help them with health, with water and sanitation projects. We just finished up one last year. We're still getting funds in there, and fortunately, they've done very well despite COVID, and I hope to be back there next year with another grant project. So that's the why for me. And I would just ask, what is your why? So think about that. I'd mentioned giving opportunities. Here's more. Rotary Direct is always great. Right now, 11% of our Rotarians in the district give through Rotary Direct. We'd like to see that number increase, but it's a great way. It's a great way to do it. And again, go to your foundation chair or myself if you have any questions on this. And then I've got just 2 more slides here. Let's see how I'm doing time-wise. Okay. I mentioned, Ilana, back to the question you asked. So this is a look at the endowment fund, and unfortunately, the slide did not get all everywhere I want, but this is basically today right here. So each one of these represents a year, and there's almost $500 million in market value in the endowment fund. This is actual dollars. There's another almost 1.5 billion in promises where Rotarians have come in and said, I'm going to give you money. Either I'm going to leave it to you as a gift after I pass away, or I'm going to give it to you over the next 5 years, those sort of things. So this is getting up there almost $2 billion, and the hope is to get it to about 2.5 billion in the next 3 or 4 years. It's already generating $21 million back to all of our projects and programs. And the hope is that you have 2.5 billion in there, it'll generate 100, 150, it'll generate a significant amount of money. So we're not as dependent on just annual giving, but it takes time. So anyway, just something to think about. It's been a great growth. I know this was the dip around 2008 or 9, but it's been on a great trajectory. And this is a kind of a good news story too. And this is my my last slide here. This is our district's endowed fund. So this is where Rotarians have come in and given an endowed named fund and said, I want this to go to the share fund. I want it to go to maternal, child, and health, or I want it to go to peace or the world fund. Today, we have 2.75 million. I can tell you right now that this figure is underrepresented by $700,000-800,000. We've got that much more in endowments hitting our books in this district right now. So we're well over almost $3.5 million in endowed funds. But today, out of just these 2 right here, we get back $11,000 to our global funds, global grant funds, and about the same amount to our district grant funds. So it's continuing to go. All of these dollars, we never see directly back to the district. All the interest off of these Rotary Peace Fellowships goes directly into the Peace Fellow programs and funds, Peace Fellows around the world. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing again. My hope was you'd get some more knowledge of the World Fund and the importance of it, and the importance of the annual fund and given to it out of it. And so I'll just stop here, and if people have questions, we'll definitely post these slides along with the grants trainings will all be posted on our website too as well. So questions, I think, Tom, you've got a question.
Yeah, Jeff, what is the total asset value of the foundation with everything? You said it was $500 million for the endowment. What is the total?
I do not know. That's the only number. I'd have to go back and look, Tom, and tell you. That's the only figure I'm aware of in terms of an asset, because of the rest of the dollars come in and go right out. The only thing that's held is the annual fund for 3 years. And that was the big challenge. That was the big aha back in when the big dip happened in 2008 and 9. And there was a drop off in annual giving, plus a drop off in the interest rates. And our trustees said, we've got to get the endowment up if we're going to ride downturns in the economy, because it hurt us significantly that time period. But I will make.
It's probably something then equivalent to the 500 million plus the annual
Yes,
pass
yeah.
through. So
It
around
is.
$1 billion then is probably
Roughly, yeah, it's roughly there.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And our foundation does a great job. I mean, you can go online and the annual reports are all there. They're pretty easy to find and read, and they mail them out to anybody who gives, basically, too. So any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. And I would just like to again thank Jason. Appreciate it very much.
No
Thanks.
problem. Everyone, thank you for joining us. Please make sure to check that calendar for the Festival of Training. There's a lot of really great sessions out there. Little plug for my own May 24th hybrid meetings. If you'd like to attend in person, feel free to reach out to me. I do have some limited seating, but it's on a lot of the PEs that I was with in PETS on how do we do this? How do we support our people, even if we're in lockdown? And even what we've been finding for people who are on vacation, if they still want to plug in, it's been interesting to see where some people actually tune in from. So everybody have a good evening, and this recording will probably be made available later. We thank you for your attendance, for your participation, and we hope everybody has a great night.
Thank you all.
Nice
you,
job,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Job.
Yes.
Thank you.
Jeff?